Hi everybody, Rob Acton here, and welcome to the next in a series of videos in which I explain how to play the City of Stains, a game that I designed and which is currently available to play on the tabletop simulator platform. In this video, we're going to deal with what are known as advanced actions. These are the actions specific to each faction. Um, each faction has 10 action cards, which they will cycle through in the course of the game, and the cards will generally repeat several times over the course of the game. As I said before in the video about basic actions, one can either play a card face down to take a basic action, or alternatively, one could play the card face up to take the advanced action. As an example, I have set out here on the board in Tabletop Simulator an example of one card from each of the factions. And the idea is to explain what you can expect to see on every action card, what the basic layout and anatomy of each such card is, and how you interpret what is written on those cards. The first thing to note is that each action card has two circles in the top left and top right corners of the card. Now, those can be empty in the case of cab drivers, or they could contain an icon, such as canonization. What you need to know about those circular spaces is that those are the costs to play the card. So advanced actions are not free. There's always or commonly a cost associated with playing that action card. If you look at the cards on display, in the case of canonization, you would have to remove an influence from somewhere in the city. In the case of both sabotage and ancient maps, you would have to take a malady token in order to play this card. When a card has a malady token cost, you the leader that has to take that malady is the leader depicted on the card, if a leader is depicted on the card. If not, then the player can decide which of its leaders takes the malady. So in the case of the enemy player playing sabotage, it is this particular leader who's depicted on the card who would have to take the malady token, whereas in the case of ancient maps, the circle player could decide which leader takes that token. So the first thing to remember, top corners of the card are its cost to play, and you can't play the card unless you pay the cost. The next area of the card to take heed of is the column on the left-hand side margin of the card. That any icons that appear in the margin on the left-hand side are requirements, not costs, but requirements. In other words, state of play that needs to exist for you to play this card. And many of them feature leaders. Uh, Sometimes they simply feature the leader's icon, meaning that the leader must be active in order for you to play this card. Now, active simply means the leader is not in jail, exile, or in the graveyard. But others require not only the leader to be active, which is indicated by the green tick, but also require the leader to have a certain minimum level before this card can be played. So in the case of the card Guild Contract, the guild has to have that particular leader at level 2 before they can play this card. That leader is known as Meshik Required, who is essentially an assassin, and he needs to be level 2 before this card can be played. There are other indicators of requirements, such as the cab driver's card, which requires at least 2 commercial buildings to be in the City of Stains before the card can be played. Remember that each building type is represented by an icon. The coins represent commercial buildings. So the requirement to play cab drivers is that that particular leader must be level 2, must be active, and there must be 2 commercial buildings in the city before this can be played. Sometimes the requirements will be in the form of a gold square with a number. This refers to the total number of levels of leaders that you have. So you simply count up the total of all the levels of all of your leaders, and it must equal this number before this particular card can be played. Now, if you recall, when you start the game, you'll be adding two level 2 tokens. In other words, two of your leaders will be starting on level 2 and the others will be on level 1, which means that you will have a minimum of 8 total levels to start the game. So these requirements are not particularly onerous. Other notable requirements are 2 malady tokens in the case of the guild contract card. This means that the guild player must have 2 malady tokens on its own leaders in total before it can play this card. In the case of sabotage, there have to be at least 2 discontent tokens in the city before the card can be played. And in the case of ancient maps, the circle player must have at least 2 exploration tokens on its player board before it can play this card. So requirements are always in the left-hand column. In the center of the card, below the artwork, you will see icons and text indicating the actual effect of the card. Sometimes the effect will be automatic, such as the case of canonization, which says canonize a level 3 plus leader. Thereafter, they generate 2 influence in the local quarter during the influence phase. So you put one of those canonization tokens onto your board above that particular leader who must be level 3, and from then on, that leader will generate 2 influence in the influence phase as if in the way that a building would. Certain actions, like the canonization action, simply take place. They don't require any dice rolls. Other actions, such as the guild contract and the sabotage action, have a dice icon on the card, indicating that the action only succeeds on a die roll of 6 or more. Now, remember that when you make a roll, certain leaders are able to use dice higher than a d6, and furthermore, when you make such rolls, your leader's level is added to the total in order to attempt to achieve a 6. So they are not guaranteed actions. Even though you've played the card, the action may not succeed, and the card will nevertheless be used up. So high-risk actions like guild contract or sabotage require you to pay the cost, then make sure the requirements are met, and then it may be that the action doesn't occur. And this is relevant because of what you see in the bottom right corner. This is the so-called secondary effect of an action card. And the thing to note about the secondary effect is that it only accrues to you if you succeed in the primary effect. So in the case of canonization, the effect would be automatic, and therefore the secondary effect, which would be to gain a treasure, would be automatic too. Likewise, cab drivers, as soon as the card is played, the Costa player may move a further leader. These are, however, secondary to the main event or the main effect having taken place. So, in the case of guild contract, it is only if you successfully remove a leader to the graveyard that you'd be entitled to the level up, which is the secondary effect. Likewise, sabotage, only if you succeed in destroying a building and replacing it with a ruin token would you be entitled to the secondary bonus or benefit, which would be a treasure token. So that is the basic layout of all action cards. Costs in the top corners, requirements down the left-hand side, Main bonus or benefit in the center of the card, both in icon and text format, and lastly in the bottom right-hand corner, the so-called secondary effect, which only occurs if the primary effect does. A further thing to note, and you'll see it only on the cab driver's card in this particular case, is you'll see the Royal Council icon on the bottom left-hand corner. Now, you'll recall that the Royal Council will contain icons representing the votes of the various factions, and also that the Royal Council is only relevant when the Crown or government posture is council or proportionate, these lower two segments of the circle. But if that is the case, then rather than pay the costs and meet the requirements, a player can cause a advanced action to occur, like you see on cab drivers for the moment, if the Royal Council approves. So you can bypass the costs and the requirements of a card if you can get the Royal Council to vote in favor of you taking this action. Now, obviously, you need a strong position in the Royal Council to do this, or you need to be sufficiently friendly with the other players, or have sufficient leverage over them for them to agree. But a majority of votes in the Royal Council is necessary if you want to take this action without cost and without requirements. So what will often happen is you will play the card, then you will take it to the council, and if the vote fails, then your option is either to play the card with requirements and costs, or alternatively to take another action with this card, which means playing the same card face down and taking a basic action. What you cannot do is ask the Royal Council to approve the playing of a specific secondary uh, secondary power, and then if that fails, then choosing another card and attempting to do the same or take the advanced action on that card. Once you commit to an advanced action, you cannot change the card, and if you fail to agree or to get the Royal Council to agree to allow you to pay the card effectively for free, then you can pay the costs as long as you meet the requirements, or alternatively, you would have to play the card face down and rather take a basic action. And that is the general structure of advanced actions and the advanced action cards that each faction has. Obviously, that's a very general overview and doesn't dig into the specific cards. And in the next 6 videos, what I'm going to do is go through the 10 action cards of each of the factions, discuss the action itself, when you would use it, how strong or weak it is in certain circumstances, and therefore give you a general primer on the actions available to each of the specific factions. But for the present purposes, that is how secondary actions work. That is how the advanced action cards are used. And I hope it gives you a better understanding of how to play now that you've uh, seen the videos on basic actions and on advanced actions. You should be in a good position to begin playing the game, albeit somewhat experimentally, and I hope you enjoy doing so. This is Rob Acton saying goodbye for the moment.